Since I finished my last sketchbook, that means it's time for me to start a new one, and I'm gonna go for something different. I've heard of this brand before, the B sketchbooks, and I've heard that they're always great paper and everything, so I finally decided, hey, why not give it a shot? I went ahead and bought the marker sketch pad in specific because, of course, that's my main medium, so yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of the details of the sketchbook itself. The cover is black, although my lights make it look like a charcoal gray. It feels like pressed cardboard as well. On the side it states marker, which is kind of like pressed in, and the same thing on the bottom, it says Be Creative. The little sleeve says the same thing, Be Creative, Be Paper Company Art Journal Series, states that it's really white paper and ultra smooth, excellent for pen, inking, and markers. It's also micro perforated to true size, is what it says. The book itself is 5.5 by 8 inches. When I open it up, I see that there's this little kind of cover for the first page, I'm guessing to keep it from smudging or anything. The paper on the inside is super white, so that was like holding true to the cover. It's also really thick paper, even though it says 110 pounds. I usually like it a little heavier when it comes to marker art, but this paper felt really sturdy when I was trying to kind of like bend it and see what was going on there. And then it also has that little plastic cover on the back as well, so it's nice that it had that little extra protection from the cover. The back of the book has the bee paper with the little cute bee on it as well. And overall, it doesn't look like a bad sketchbook, but what really matters is the test of actually drawing in it. After taking a look at the sketchbook and kind of letting it soak into me that I have a new one, I was like, okay, it's time to draw now. So I went ahead and did a sketch off screen because it's way easier for me. And then afterwards, I went ahead and inked it up because, again, off screen, it's just way easier. And I wanted to start coloring as soon as I could. Of course, before I put like any color down, I put the protective sheet under it just so nothing bleeds onto the next page. Because nowhere did it state that it doesn't bleed, which I appreciate because a lot of companies will be like, yeah, our paper doesn't bleed. And then you turn the page and you're like, oh, okay, you liars. You straight up liars. So that's nice that they didn't go ahead and put that in there. I want to say that this paper is amazing at laying down color and showing its true color. I know that sounds weird, like how can a paper not show true color in general? But for some reason, this marker paper really makes the colors like show up in their best quality and form. They don't look dull or too dark or like dirty or muddy or anything like that. The colors really show in a fantastic way when you put them down. The issue for me that came was when it began to dry later on, and I'll show you what I mean. Some of the colors kind of started separating a tiny bit weird, and I didn't know if that was because I was over blending or if it was just the colors that I was using weren't necessarily that close in tone together. So because I had to blend more because the tones weren't close together, that the paper started to have these little speckles on it, which kind of bothers me because I don't like the speckles. They like leave a weird look on the artwork. However, that's just if you're really zoomed into the art that you'll end up seeing that kind of thing instead of like you looking at it normally. But because the colors were laying down so nicely, I almost didn't mind how the colors would kind of sit in a way. I have since this drawing used this sketchbook I think another 2 times, and the colors were doing perfectly fine there, so I don't know if it really was just the colors that I chose and how I blended them together that kind of gave off that look. So I'd keep that in mind for the future, especially for myself, because I'm going to be using this sketchbook to its completion. One thing that I didn't think of when I was lining it was how much time I should have given the liner to dry. Because this paper is made for marker ink, and for inking in general, honestly, it's probably made to be easier to reactivate with liners and stuff. So as a result, I did end up smudging my liner. So I tried it in another drawing a few days later. I made the drawing, I lined it, and then the next day I colored it, allowing the liner to dry, and I didn't really have the issue of smudging. So when I did this drawing right here that you're seeing right now, directly after I colored, I went ahead and lined. because that's just the mindset I was in. For my last sketchbook, I didn't have to wait for it to dry because the paper was different. It was a little bit more toothed, so the ink could just set in quicker. When you have super smooth paper, your ink takes longer to set in because the paper is so smooth and there's nothing to grab the ink onto. Instead, it kind of just lays flatly there and then slowly absorbs into the paper. So you'd have to give it a few minutes to kind of dry up. So maybe either do what I did the second time, which is wait the next day to color, or just give it like a half hour to an hour to fully dry down, which I know sucks because I'm the type of person that I have to go in directly after because I get really excited to line, but I'm gonna have to sadly wait it out instead. So I believe I forgot to mention the price of the book. I got it off of Amazon for $12.76, and this is the 5.5 by 8 version. I would have gotten the bigger one, which I actually prefer, but the bigger version, which was the 8 by 11, like jumped in price double, so it costed $30 instead, and I was like, I'm not paying $30 for a marker sketchbook that I won't know would even work completely. So I opted out for the smaller one, which means that I'm gonna have to push myself a little harder with this sketchbook because I don't draw small at all. In fact, I struggle a lot with drawing smaller, which you could tell in this drawing, which I actually don't like. But all the proportions are off because I'm not used to drawing in such a small area or space. So I'm thinking, hey, this is a big / regular sketchbook and I'm drawing in my regular form, when I had to actually change up everything and make sure things were more proportionate than they actually are. So I struggled a lot with that, and I actually ended up hating this drawing as a result, but I didn't have time to film out another drawing, and I was like, you know what, I shouldn't beat myself up too hard for it. It still doesn't look bad, it just looks disproportionate. Anyway, yeah, so that's one struggle that I had with this sketchbook. If the bigger one was cheaper, I would have gotten it, but honestly, I was like not prepared to do $30. Maybe $20, I would have been like, okay, sure, but otherwise, that's a no from me, dog. It's not gonna happen, no. When I was coloring in this video, I did use my Copic markers, but since then I've also used some Ohuhu markers and the CMYK Plus markers, and all of them blend really good on this paper, along with show their color really well. So I honestly think that this sketchbook is really nice for markers. When I was using the sketchbook, it felt really familiar to me. Now, I've never used it before in my life, but it definitely felt like it, and that's when it popped into my brain that it's just like the Copic Sketchbook. When I used the Copic Sketchbook, I didn't really like it a lot because of, I don't know, it just was not a good sketchbook for me, number one. I didn't really like a lot of the drawings in there. Number two, the paper was always iffy with me, and this one kind of reminded me of that, but this paper was almost better than the Copic Sketchbook paper. It does have the same properties where it blends really well, and it also has the true color thing that I kind of spoke of earlier, but the Copic paper for me was a little lackluster compared to this paper right here, which is significantly better in my opinion, and the paper is much thicker, so I feel like I could beat it up more with some color, and I won't have to fear the paper like messing up or anything. It also sketched nicely on there. The paper was smooth, but it wasn't so smooth that it was like uncomfortable to sketch on. That's definitely how it felt for the Copic Sketchbook. I could not really sketch on there because it just really didn't feel nice whenever I tried to do it, so I take that into account as well. Keep in mind that this sketchbook as well is specifically for markers and inking. I do not suggest it for things like watercolor at all, or regular sketching, because it just doesn't suit them. You can sketch in here, but realistically this paper, if you're gonna buy specific marker paper, I suggest you use it with markers, and watercolor just would not be able to do anything on this paper. It would just, you would have a very difficult time. Overall, I think this is gonna be an alright sketchbook for me. I hope I can overcome the whole like size thing when I'm drawing, so I have a good time using the book and not struggle so much. So yeah, thanks for watching, and remember, I love you. Bye.